I'm learning, you're learning, so let's learn together. I'll do all the footwork and heavy lifting to find the guests and subjects that will help broaden our understanding of the Civil War. All I ask from you is your support. Please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg and learn with me. That's patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. And I thank you in advance.
Here we go. Ready?
Ready.
All right. Don't be nervous.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios,
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we have an old friend of ours. This is her third time on the show. And last night she gave a lecture at the Fortenbaugh what do they call it?
It's the Fortenbaugh Lecture at Gettysburg.
The Fortenbaugh Lecture
Yeah.
at Gettysburg College. John S. Mosby, Rise and Fall of a Confederate Hero, or Lessons from the Judas of the Lost Cause. It's Carrie Janney. Welcome back, Carrie.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you back on. I love listening to you talk. I don't get to do it enough. You need to come up here more because I never leave Gettysburg. But no, it was a great lecture last night.
Thank you.
And let me just quote Jim Downs here. He called you a force of light and brilliance in the field. I agree. He says you have ebullient enthusiasm. I have to still look up ebullient. And he introduced you as the resplendent and irrepressibly brilliant.
I love Jim Downs.
And you said that you're going to have him introduce you everywhere you go.
I am. I've decided, you know how some famous people have people that carry their umbrellas and whatnot? I'm going to have Jim introduce me.
Your introducer.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. But no, I think he is absolutely correct in all that stuff. You have... You just have a very easy way about you when you talk, and I think people really like that. So, okay, you talked about Mosby, and what I love about it is that you started off with the Mosby Heritage area signs,
right?
And now I grew up going to visit my family in Warrenton, Virginia, and it was Mosby this, Mosby that, Mosby everywhere, right? Mosby Highway. It was his office in Warrenton. I knew the name Mosby before I knew who the guy was, right? And now that's all gone. Right.
So it came, well, it went, and then it came, and then it went. I mean, it's really this, as Civil War memory goes, he's a fascinating figure because he was popular and then he was canceled.
Yeah.
In the 19th century. And then he rose to fame again. And since 2020, of course, his name has been disappearing from all sorts of places.
So it's interesting, though, because I guess the reason why his name has been disappearing now is because he was a Confederate.
Right.
But totally disregarding that he really became almost an anti-Confederate in the end.
He did. I mean, in some ways, he and Longstreet, maybe we should take another look at them and reconsider those who rejected much of the lost cause, those who called a spade, that addressed the fact that slavery was at the heart of the war. And instead of completely erasing them from our vernacular or thinking about them, and I'm not saying that we need road signs and monuments to him, but as we think about those people who pushed against the lost cause version of the war, maybe we should reconsider some of these figures and not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Which we tend to do when we go to extremes.
Yes, we do.
So let's go back. Who was Mosby? How did his life start?
So Mosby is born in Virginia in 1833 to a slaveholding family. Both his paternal and maternal grandparents from Central Virginia and Western Virginia, extensive slaveholding families. He grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. His family enslaved at least 20 people in 1850. So he's coming from the slaveholding elite. Goes off to UVA at 16 years old to University of Virginia, where he Gets in trouble for a lot of different things, including riding his horse too fast through the streets of Charlottesville, but really gets in trouble when he shoots a medical student, George Turpin, in the neck. And he apparently, according to him and to other testimony, George Turpin was a bully, but Mosby took a pepper box pistol and went to his boarding house, waited for him, and shot him in the neck. So he's expelled from UVA. And
what was that over?
It was, as 19-year-olds go.
Yeah, not much.
It was over accusations that Mosby had stolen a fiddler that George Turpin wanted to hire for a party. And Mosby had hired him instead.
Oh, my God.
And yes, I mean, it was really, high stakes.
Wow. Can you imagine how embarrassing is that for the medical students? Like, oh, man, what'd you do? How'd you get shot? Oh, I accused him of stealing my fiddler. It's like, how many fiddlers were there about? You could have found somebody else. Apparently, yeah, I guess. So, okay. So he gets shot, he gets expelled. Or he shoots a guy, gets expelled. Does he get in legal trouble?
He does.
Yeah, what happens there?
He's charged with murder. And ultimately...
Oh, he died. The kid died?
I'm sorry. He did not die. He almost died. He's charged with attempted murder.
Okay.
And Mosby will be found guilty of unlawful shooting. But he is to spend a year in jail. He was a very sickly child. Lots of testimony from doctors that he was constantly ill, and so it wasn't clear that he would survive a jail sentence. And then there was a fine on top of that, and if he didn't pay the fine, he would have to stay in jail even longer. There's this amazing petition campaign that his mother leads that ends up resulting in a pardon for him in December of 1953. But during that time, he has befriended the local prosecutor, the man who prosecuted the case, and he starts reading law. And by the time he leaves the jail cell in early January of 1854, he is ready to start apprenticing. And by 1855, he will be admitted to the bar in Albemarle County by the very same judge who oversaw his unlawful shooting case.
Really? So, I mean, I almost feel like stories like that were more, not common, but doable back then, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, his story is both extraordinary and very commonplace. And the fact that there was an outlet, but again, he comes from not the wealthiest families in Albemarle County by any means, but...
What did his family do?
I mean, they're farmers. I mean, his father raises tobacco and cattle and sheep. And so as Albemarle County went... even though they're of the planter class because they had 20 plus enslaved people, in Albemarle County, there are enslavers that have hundreds of slaves. So they're not the top of the top.
Right, okay.
Within the hierarchy there. But they know enough people, and they are tapped into. The lieutenant governor of Virginia is a friend of the family. And so those connections. So maybe it's not so different from today.
No, I guess no. Maybe you're right.
Connections.
Yeah, well, it's always about connections. It's true.
Yes, it is.
So... He starts in law and he kind of moves all over the place in Virginia.
He does.
Right? Now, when he becomes a lawyer, he also meets his wife at that time. When does he meet his wife?
So he meets his wife, Pauline Clark, in 1856 or 1857. She has family in the Albemarle County area. Her family has come to visit. They meet when he's in this little bitty hamlet of Albemarle County. Albemarle County is where Charlottesville is. And little bitty hamlet called Howardsville. He meets her there. She's from Kentucky. Her father had been a gubernatorial candidate, a Democratic congressman and candidate for governor in Kentucky. Very tapped into the national Democratic scene. He's going to the political conventions in 1856 and otherwise. And so they get married in 1856. I found some new letters, letters that other historians that have written, other biographers have not used. I actually think he's living in Kentucky for 2 years with her family. And in 1858, they moved to Washington County, which is Bristol, Virginia. And Bristol is one of those cities that is both in Virginia and Tennessee, right there on the border, because it's so close to Kentucky, but it's also on the railroad line that will go to where his parents are living outside of Lynchburg.
Okay.
So it's kind of a central location. He's one of 3 lawyers in town in Bristol, and he can practice in both Virginia and Tennessee. He had actually gone to scout out where he might live in 1856. And there's a wonderful letter he writes his sister when he goes to Memphis and he sees the Mississippi River for the first time. And he writes back and says, this is a great place. The courts are in session all year long here. A lawyer could make a lot of good money. And so he's considering moving west for some time. But he and Pauline will settle in Bristol, Virginia in 1858. Seems to have a pretty good law practice there. When the secession crisis starts looming, when we have the election of 1860, he's a staunch Unionist, throws his hat behind Stephen Douglas, is one of 56 men in the county to vote. And keeping in mind that when you vote in the 19th century, people know how you vote. You show up at the poll and you have your ballot that is clearly marked for whichever candidate. And so all your neighbors know how you're voting. And this is true in the 1870s. This is, when we talk about Reconstruction and black voting, this is part of what's going on there too. So all his neighbors know that he's going against them. Staunch Unionist. He gets into a spat with a local shop owner who is very much a secessionist. And Mosby says, I will never turn my hand on my country. And then when he does, he has to go back and eat crow a bit. But he grew up riding horses. He certainly was familiar with horses, but he didn't even own a horse in 1860.
Right, you said he had to rent a horse to get to work?
A horse.
Or to go to court? Yeah.
Yes, to go to court in Abington, he would have to rent a horse. So when the cavalry, when the local mounted rifles are organizing, he has to borrow a horse to go join the cavalry or the militia group. And William Blackford writes a great deal about him and says, he's a slouchy rider. He is sloppy. He doesn't want to participate in drills. He only shows up half the time. So no one was saying, that man.
Right. It's going to be somebody.
He's going to be a colonel of the cavalry.
Is he how would you describe him personality wise at this point?
At this point, I think he's always soft-spoken.
Okay.
He's a small man. He's 5'7", which we know is average for Civil War soldiers, but he's very thin. He's 120 pounds, soaking wet. People comment on his piercing blue eyes, sandy blonde hair, but very frail looking. But he's very quiet, and he's not going to be the loud person. He's not going to be the person you pick out of the crowd.
Right.
As being
unassuming guy.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that we see from a very early age that he has this contrarian spirit. He has a fighting spirit. He comes to really relish fighting. And after the first battle of Manassas, he writes a letter home to Pauline, to his wife, and he talks about how he feels alive. That fighting is what's really, that he loves a soldier's life, and he didn't expect to. So, but very soft-spoken, and his personality is going to emerge over the course of the war, and we'll see a stronger and stronger persona. But he's not outspoken. He's not initially flamboyant, which by the time, and we can keep going through the chronology, but I'll say by the time he's leading his own command, by the spring of 63, when he and Stuart, Jeb Stuart is his idol. He has been scouting for Stuart in the spring of 62. He's part of the ride with around McClellan. He's in the lead, doing a lot of the scouting during that. But in 63, when he has his own command and he rides into Middleburg, William Blackford, who's there to witness this, says there's a complete transformation in the man that I saw ride into town. The man who was such a slouchy rider and so sloppy in his appearance is now the best dressed among them. And he's going to start to emulate Stuart. He's going to have that scarlet cloak that he wears. He's going to have an ostrich plume in his hat. So he's very much going to take on that Cavalier mentality over the course of the war. But
it's funny how
the rest of this preview is available over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.